Hello and welcome to Legendary Lunacy. I am your host today, Lord Papa Lunacy himself, and we've got another creepypasta for you. Um, if you're not up to date on the channel, we did a couple of tier lists, and we interspersed them throughout the next couple of weeks, or next couple of days, because it was such a big tier list on that one. We're gonna hopefully do more tier lists soon. We've also got some live action stuff coming out here shortly. We've got a weekend coming up that we're gonna do some filming, but it's neither here nor there. Right now we're here for a scary story. So without further ado, let's get into it. This is The Two-Headed Boy by Matt Deeping. Sorry. Watching TV was always one of my favorite things to do. In the early years, this proved difficult. Ramus, being the stronger of our halves, would pull me until the remote was always within reach of his arm, and out of that of mine. I didn't usually mind though, and eventually, Mom saved up enough from her waitressing job at the local American-style diner called Frank's to buy a second TV. From then on, it didn't matter who sat closest to the remote. Ramus liked to watch those old slapstick movies, Laurel and Hardy, Charlie Chaplin, all the falling over stuff. His favorite was the 1930s film called Blockheads, about Stan learning the conveniences of modern world. He'd laugh maniacally again and again as he hit rewind on the remote to watch the whole thing over. I can't stand that movie. But hearing Ramus laugh was nice. When your brother can't speak, it's sometimes hard to know how he's feeling. But when he's laughing, I know he's happy. We were born on the 7th of July, 1994, by emergency C-section. It hadn't been a surprise when we came out. The doctors had already informed my mother of our condition, which they had picked up, to the delight of the medical world, via ultrasound. Woman gives birth to two-headed boy. The headline of the local newspaper from the Colchester Gazette had read. We spent the first 2 years of our life in hospital before we were allowed to move into a council-owned flat near my mother's parents. I have no real memory of any of this, but Mum would tell us how people from all over the world would come to the hospital just to knock on the flat door to get a look at us. My earliest memory is going to school for the first time. Mum helped us into the classroom and set us both down on a seat near the front of the class before placing a kiss on each of our heads and leaving. Mrs. Neer, the reception class teacher, then made each of the children stand up and say their name. When it was our turn, Ramus hadn't wanted to stand. I can only guess it's because he knew he wouldn't be able to say his own name. With my right arm pushing on the table, I tried to get us to stand up, but Ramus wasn't moving, and he pinched my thigh, out of sight. It's okay, dear, Mrs. Neer had said softly from where she sat behind her desk. What are your names? Hello, I'm Romulus, and this is my brother Ramus. With an almighty thump, Ramus smashed his hand into the table, and the rest of the class erupted into giggles. Ramus looked side to side, glaring at the room. Before I had a chance to tell him that it was going to be okay, he had taken our body from where we sat and was dragging my half of ourselves across the classroom to the door. Things calmed down after that incident. The other children weren't kind, and never would they wish to play with us, but that didn't bother Ramus and me. We had each other, and that was enough. Another memory I have is when Mom would take us to swimming at the outdoor swimming pool in Brightling Sea. Looking back on it now, I'm sure there were those who were skeptical about our ability to swim, but it was, as it turned out, we loved it. And when my brother and I wanted the same thing, we were almost able to read each other's mind, what we're thinking. And to the astonishment of the swimmers, we would race up and down the pool, doing laps after lap. However, the memory that stands out most from those swimming trips was the game of Lifesaver. This is a game where we would sink to the bottom of the pool, and then, taking turns, one of us would swim the other to the surface. I wasn't strong enough to get myself and Ramus to the surface, so when it was my turn, Ramus would kick with his leg to help. One day we were playing the game, and it was my turn to swim us to the surface. And down we sank, our arms by our sides, as we submerged into the deep end, and I could feel the pressure in my ears as we hit the bottom of the pool. We sat there for a moment, looking up at the strange twinkling of the sun makes upon the water. When my breath was close to running out, I raised my arm and made a stroke towards the surface. We bobbed a foot or so off the bottom, and with my left leg I kicked and pushing ourselves off the tiled pool bed, but we didn't move. My lungs were starting to hurt, and I knew we needed to get out of there, from under the water. I looked to Ramus. He stared back with a huge grin upon his face. I glared at him and frantically kicked out and swept my arms through the water, trying to get us to the surface, but Ramus didn't move. He just kept smiling at me. Next thing I remembered is waking up as the lifeguard breathed into my mouth. The taste of chlorine was strong, and it gargled in the back of my throat before I vomited. The lifeguard, a young man in his late teens, looked at us in disgust and rushed away into the bathroom. I'd never forgotten that moment. It wasn't long after this moment that we discovered masturbation. We knew about sex. Who didn't this day and age? But masturbation was something that was completely foreign to us. I mean, sure, we had woken up with a stiff dick for months, but, I mean, none of us had mentioned it in any sort of way. We'd overheard Sean Hart, a boy in our 9th grade class, whispering about it to some other boys in the back of the science class. "Give it a good tug," were his words. A few nights later, we did. Mom was working late shift at Frank's, where she was now a supervisor. Ramus and I were watching a film called The Girl Next Door, the one with that hot blonde, Alicia Cuthbert. Well, it had just gotten to the scene where Alicia was taking her top off, and it was about to jump into the swimming pool when I felt Ramus's hand slip into our jeans. The next 5 minutes were strange. It was an odd sensation, and one which seemed to almost never get started, but once it did, it was all over far too soon. This started a spell of steady morning masturbation. I never started it, but Ramus would reach down and do the deed just after we woke up every day. I never spoke about it, and sometimes I'd pretend like I was still asleep as he did it, but I never complained. It remained entirely consensual. When we were 17, we made our first friend, Christopher Hughes, whose family moved in next door in the winter of 2011. Chris was unlike the other teenagers we'd met. He never looked at us with pity, nor did he seem afraid or put off by our appearance. He'd often come around and watch TV with us, both of us. Ramus liked him too, and would hold his hand. They would both cheer as they watched the scene where Chaplin is roller skating, and I liked Chris too. We would talk about the Ainsworth girls who lived around the corner from us, and how we'd both like to know how they looked under their matching blouses they'd often wear. Ramus didn't like this, however. He'd pinch me whenever the subject came up and would grab Chris's hand. The masturbation continued, where Ramus was pumping up to 4 or 5 times a day, whenever he could get a free moment away from Mom. He did become addicted to it, and even when our dick hurt, he couldn't help himself. I liked it too. In 2012, we turned 18, and Mom held a party. Even one of the doctors who had been at our birth came to congratulate us. A few of the older ladies who worked in Frank's came and brought presents, mostly DVDs of old movies, probably based on Mom's suggestions. The only real friend of ours who turned up was Chris. As soon as the door opened, Ramus dragged me over to him and embraced him in the hallway. Eventually we sat down, blew out the candles on the cake, which is much easier with 2 hands, and said goodbye to our guests. I watched as Chris spoke to my mother in the kitchen about something. She nodded and ran over to where we were sitting. "Boys," he began, and cleared his throat. "Men, I have something to show you." We followed Chris outside, and on his driveway next to ours was a car. It wasn't anything fancy, a bright red Fiesta with a dent in the driver's side door. "My new ride." He held open his arms, and we took in the spectacle. Ramus grunted in excitement. "How about we take her for a spin?" Ramus looked at me, and I looked at Mom, who was watching from the front door, and she nodded. Before I had time to turn my head back to Ramus, Ramus was climbing into the passenger side front seat. We cruised along the mostly empty streets out of the town, and to a local reservoir where we finally got out and sat on the hood of the car talking about the night. "Here," Chris said, "I have something to show you." He jumped off the hood of the car and fuddled around with something in the back seat. Then he pulled it out. A bra. And I laughed. "Where'd you get that from?" I demanded to know. "Amy Ainsworth," Chris said proudly. "Did you?" I asked, desperate to know. "Twice," he said, and threw the bra at us as he jumped back onto the hood of the car. What happened next changed my life forever. Ramus lifted his hand and grabbed onto the back of Chris's head, clumps of hair sticking out between his strong fingers. We stood up, and in one violent motion, he slammed Chris's head onto the hood of the car. I didn't say anything. I was completely stunned. Again, Remus lifted Chris's head and smashed it into the red metal. Thump. Over and over he did that until Chris's head was nothing but a mashed, bloody mess. Eventually, Remus let go. Chris was laying bent over the car's front, not moving, not making any sound at all. "What the fuck have you done?" I muttered, and then screamed, "No, Remus!" A fist came flying in from the side of me and smashed into my face, dazing me. My eyes watered, so I couldn't see what was happening. I don't remember walking back to town, or climbing into bed, but that's where I woke. Immediately I could tell something was different. I looked over to Remus, but I didn't see his scruff of black, curly hair. I saw plastic, white and glossy. "Remus?" There was no reply. I moved my hand to where it should be and felt it. The plastic of the bag, which had been tied around his head. With one hand, I tore at the bag, ripping it apart, unveiling the stiff, pale face of my brother, his mouth still agape from his final breath, final gasp for life. 3 weeks later, I'm being held in Essex County Police. Held by the Essex County Police, but it's unlikely I'll go to prison. It's similarly unlikely I'll survive much longer. The doctors say it's a miracle I have so far. I tried to tell them it wasn't me, that it was Remus, but nobody listened. Not even Mum, who has apparently left Colchester to live with her sister up north. But for the first time since I was born, I'm alone. In an odd way, I'm at peace. The nurse turns the TV on, and it's playing Blockheads. I watch it for a minute, and in the back of my mind I remember how Remus would laugh, and I smile. I lay there, handcuffed to the bed, and watch for a few minutes longer. Then I rest my head upon Remus and close my eyes. It's a good one. It's really dark. I wondered how they were gonna... Yeah. That was a good little story. I like that one. Well, without further ado, we're gonna call that one an episode. If you have any comments, leave them down below. If you have any thoughts, leave those down below too. Like, comment, subscribe, because it'll help the channel, and we really appreciate that. Until next time, sit back, relax, and enjoy the darkness around you. Love you guys. Take care.